So we've been working our way through fundamentals of Tibetan Buddhism. I know that most people are clear experts by now. But the thing that, and one of the reasons we chose this text was it does a really good job of just working its way through this whole sort of process in view of a path that ends all suffering. I'm up for that kind of a path that ends all suffering. And with this approach, with a Buddhist context, why we find it really meaningful, especially when we think about it on Wednesday nights, is an approach that as a human being we can just relate to. You don't have to believe in anything. It's really asking us to look at the nature of our own suffering and identify what are these problems. And is there a set of skills, some tools that we can really adopt to really go after the core root of our problems and see if we can't save ourselves a lot of suffering. And so when we look at Buddhists in this method, most often as people go through the Four Noble Truths, they recognize that the real source of mental and emotional suffering is really our own self-centered attachments and desires and grasping, and it's in our mind. It's not out there. It's not how things are happening to us. It's not the events of our lives, the conditions, as much as how we relate and perceive to them. So just to think of this in my own mind, some real clear examples are, and we're talking about mental and emotional suffering first, okay? We're not talking about hurt. Somebody hits you with a bat, it's going to hurt. You can think all the happy thoughts you want, but it'll probably still hurt. But my mental and emotional suffering, depression, anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration, loneliness, depression, these are of my mind. And their nature is my mind. And for all of the gyms that we have out there, I think was it one of the talks we had when I was gone, the nun talked about, we have all these gyms out there, fitness gyms that people go to, but how many gyms for our mind? How can we get our mind in shape? Because it is an unruly beast. And I thought, well, a good example, I was once an auto mechanic. Well, okay, I was an auto parts replacement person. That would be much more respectful of actual auto mechanics. They would tell me what to replace, and I could do that, So, but it was fascinating because I could, work on a car, and it would be hot, and your hands would get mangled, and things could get frustrating, and sometimes that would seem really difficult. And then I thought, when I went out and played basketball later, I was expending twice the amount of energy easily. But that was not difficult. But sitting here under this car was difficult. And I thought, where's the difficult? Because it was a lot more physical to run up and down court. But that was fun. So what made that fun and this difficult? And then how fun it was when something actually went into place and the bolt just went right in. Then it was fun. Where's the fun? Where's the difficult? Well, is that not in my mind? We used to clean up the shop on Fridays. And so if I was the lowly guy mopping and sweeping, man, this sucked. It's 90 degrees, I'm sweeping and mopping. He's over there, doing the mechanic work. And it occurred to me, I got paid the same amount of money if I'm sweeping as if I was doing the work. But ego, like this is not what I should be doing. Where's the suffering, an image of myself. And so when we start to take this out in the world in other ways, we often find ourselves in hard and difficult situations. And the question is, where's the hard? Is it really hard? If you're sitting at a computer, in a chair, with air conditioning or heating, with some warm clothing on, and at a keyboard doing some work, where's the hard part. The hard part might be is there's a task that's challenging to do, to figure out mentally. But if it's something I don't want to do, well, then it becomes really hard. And, when I think about what's hard, there are things that are actually hard physically that are very difficult that mentally may not be very hard, and other things not challenging at all physically that are very hard mentally. So we start to understand that my mind is actually creating a lot of this tension. If I shift my perspective in any way, what was once difficult becomes very easy. When I start reflecting upon the real challenges that some people have in life, when we get to the text, they're mentioning a monk in here named Palden Gyatso. Palden Gyatso was a monk who joined the monastery of Drepung at 10 years old, and he trained in the monastic tradition. He was incredible at practices that we're about to talk about. And in 1959, after the uprising, the escape from the Dalai Lama, he was imprisoned in Chinese prisons for 33 years of his life. And he was tortured much of those 33 years, horrifically tortured. And, His Holiness had asked him once, about that must have been really hard, must have been dangerous. And he said, yeah, it was very dangerous. Sometimes I almost lost compassion for the people torturing me. Because he knew the real danger was that. The physical body come and go, the pains come and go. But the real danger is to lose his compassion. The real juice of the meaning and purpose of his life. The meaning and purpose of his life was not to have a mangled and tortured, hateful mind, but a mind that could be liberated. And so one of his main practices that he did was called Tonglen practice. That's where you take upon the suffering of others and you give your virtue. Tonglen. Which is where we're at in the verse. But I just mention this because sometimes the context of things in our lives loses perspective. And our troubles become very big and overwhelming. And we forget that big and overwhelming is in my mind, because really it's just Wednesday. It's really just Wednesday. And it's Wednesday in Carbondale, in a nice place where we have our basic needs met. And where is this mental and emotional suffering that we carry with us from day to day? Is it out there? And is it if I could just line up everything just so? If I could just get the right amount of powder up on the mountain, if I could just get the right little dessert, if I could just get the right relationship, if I could just get this stuff just so, I'll have it made. And then it'll be Wednesday. And then I'll have a new set of worries. Because that great snow that we just had, or then, the desire for the next thing happens. Like maybe a hot chocolate afterwards. And then the next thing. And then anger, resentment still arises. I just had a great day and I still have anger arise. What's that about? And how can I be mad at someone I love? How can I be mad at someone I love? I say I love this person. They're someone I share my life with, and I get angry and I yell at them. How's that work? How's that work? We get caught up over little things that trigger us to great anger over someone I love. And the problem that we forget to address is that that's here, not there. And anger's in my mind. It's a mental affliction. It's not out there. It's here. And I can water it and nurture it. Or I can water and nurture some other things. But more importantly, and to the point of these next practices, I can actually start to sever the roots of anger, of resentment, of jealousy. because they're all based in misperception. They're all based in an untruth, a misperception. And they're fundamentally surrounded around me being the most important person in the room. The center of the universe. And I constantly try to arrange the rest of the universe to make me happy. And that's a losing battle. And it's one that then grabs on with that attachment and that aversion and the desire and then the angst. So the practices we've been engaging in and where we're at now is these 8 verses of thought transformation that really become a method for just shifting that perspective from me being the center of the universe to becoming a part of the universe and starting to see how can I engage in this world in a more skillful way that allows me to contribute to a purpose-filled life with 7 billion other human beings and a lot of other animals and the environment that we live in. And when I let go of that idea of me being the center of the universe, the self-cherishing attitude, I automatically release all of the attachment and aversion that clings with it. So we cut through it. But it's important to recognize it first, because the real profound, pervasive, in-depth, ingrained, I wonder how many more I can throw in there, delusion is that world out there is creating my anger, frustration, resentment, jealousy, and all that. It's just pervasive, that the source of my problem is somewhere out there. And that's very different than truth. You know, the world that we live in is an interdependent world. And however I experience it has a lot to do with my attitude about it, has a lot to do with my perception of it. And has, of course, things to do with everyone else in there. But fundamentally, the real source of my mental anguish is always here. The anger's here. And the anger is commonly... I mean, the working hypothesis of Buddhism, just to be straightforward, is that all mental afflictions are dependent upon misperception. It's all straightforward. If you're angry, resentful, jealous, frustrated, etc., on and on, if you examine it all the way down to its fundamental nature, you will find that it is based in a misperception, something that's not true. And so all of Buddhism is about what's true. If I actually perceive myself accurately and you accurately, there's no way that anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration can arise. It just can't happen. That's the working hypothesis. Now, like any hypothesis, you got to test it. Is that true? We want to know if it's true. Test it out. Is there something that gives rise to anger that's based in something that's actually fundamentally true? And the usual one is, I would be happy if. I would be really happy if. That would make me happy, and that would make me, really devastated. So when we look at this sort of Buddhist approach, it's saying, well, let's take a working hypothesis and go, what can we examine? And so I think it's pretty easy to examine where is anger. It's in my mind. And can someone be the cause of my anger? We always do it in a little debate thing. Can someone be the cause of my anger? Can they actually be the cause? And so to understand this more fully, we would say, so anger, for something to be a cause, it needs to be of the same stuff. Okay, same stuff. So anger is a mental or emotional state. Now, someone out there, are they a mental and emotional state? And the answer is no. So if something is of the same stuff, so for example, what's the cause for a tree? That would be a seed. A seed is of the same nature. A seed grows into a tree, gives rise to a tree, right? Seed, tree, fades. Now, trees can't exist without the seed, right? So it's the same stuff. So the real cause of a tree would be the seed of a tree. And likewise, a tree gives rise to the seed. So it's the same stuff. It looks different. It gives rise to, and it shifts and it changes. So when we think about anger or other emotional states, resentment, jealousy, all that, that is of mental and emotional stuff. And those seeds are always in my mind. Those seeds are not out there. Now, can someone be a condition that triggers my anger? Yes. Now we're cooking, with oil here, or fire, right? Not oil, fire. We're cooking with fire. So, I need the seed in order for the condition to work, though. Like a tree, we need soil and water and sun and so forth. And then a tree can grow. Likewise, an anger can grow, but no seed, no anger. Right? No seed, no anger. So then we start to wonder, how do we plant these seeds of anger? How do they exist? And they tend to be rooted in my mind that is really fundamentally grasping onto wanting something to be a certain way. So now we just go to Western psychology, and Western psychology says the common theme of anger is something is blocking, thwarting what I want. That's why we get angry. Something's not the way I want it, and something's blocking me. Anger arises. It's a physiological response. We get blood into our hands. We're ready to fight, to remove what's in front of me. To remove what's in front of me. That's what it does. It's a theme in terms of why anger arises. Just, Western psychology. So fundamentally, when I think about anger, then, it's really arising from my mind that has a certain perception of how things should be, which often eliminates the potential for how things are. And so it's an interesting little piece that we work with here. And so I'm using this as an entry gate to start to work with the practices we're about to get to. I'm laying a foundation that says fundamentally that our mental and emotional suffering is of our nature, and it's not out there. So anything that happens to us, if we change our perspective of it, it'll change, right? If I break my leg and it's a terrible thing and I'm missing a ski season and it's horrible, versus, I had medical insurance, I had medical insurance. I didn't lose my leg. I can walk. I can talk. I start shifting when I start thinking about people who have no legs. Then all of a sudden my perspective changes, right? Getting a damaging car accident and get injured. And that could be, the fact that I didn't die, that someone came to my rescue, that people helped me, and then the kind and generosity of others to help me. What's different? What's different is how I'm looking at it, right? And then the biggest news of all is that whatever anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration, depression, anything that you label across the board, we've all had this range of emotions more times than we can count. How many times have you been angry in your life? How many times have you been scared? How many times have you been depressed? How many times have you felt utterly lonely and in despair? You can't count, I bet. And then what happened? And now it's Wednesday. So here we can start working at a hypothesis. Mental and emotional events come and go, but they don't last. And they're not who we are. They are things we experience and we get swept away by. If that doesn't illustrate how we should train our mind to realize that no matter how frustrated I am in this moment, I probably won't be this frustrated tomorrow. Maybe not even in 10 minutes. But when I'm in it in that moment, it feels pretty darn visceral. Doesn't it? So this understanding of how we interact with the world, the events in our world, we just want to really remember that we're bringing something to the table. my attitude, my perspective, my own sense of desire and attachment, versus the idea that I can also bring to the table a sense of connection, of interdependence, and of how things actually are. Can I engage in this world as things are? Can I engage in this world more accurately? And if I engage in this world more accurately, would I have less mental and emotional suffering? So that's the working hypothesis. So for example, if I start to, just the common one I use all the time is, when we call somebody a jerk, right? They're a jerk. Every time I see them, what do I see? I see a jerk. Very common. We do it all the time. I talk about it all the time, and I bet we still go out and do it, right? Jerk. Jimmy the jerk. Every time I see Jimmy, he's a jerk, man. Let me tell you about Jimmy. And then you tell me, no, Jimmy's all right. I just saw him give some charity, down at the co-op there. I saw him make a donation. He goes, nah, he didn't do that. He wanted to look good, because that's what. Like I'll have a whole story about why Jimmy did something nice, because I know he's a jerk. How often do we do that about people? We think we know who they are. We think we know what they are. And we put a label on it, and we actually believe that label to capture who they are. It's phenomenal when we do that. But is it true? And fundamentally, it can't be true. There's no human being you'll ever find who does everything jerky all day long, including their sleep. It's just fundamentally impossible. And most of the things that Jimmy does all day long, probably we wouldn't find jerky at all, right? When he's just walking across the street, when he's taking his kids to school, when he's paying his bills, all those things are not jerky at all. He did one or two things I don't like. He becomes a jerk. That colors everything he does, and every time I see him. Or worse yet, he disrespects me in some way. So he's a really effing jerk, right? And then it's worse. And every time I see him, I see this person based on a feeling I had by how I perceived being treated. But if someone had told me that just before that, Jimmy had lost his sister, and, now all of a sudden my view of Jimmy's different. No wonder he treated me that way. He just lost his sister. And then is Jimmy a jerk anyway? Or did Jimmy do a jerky thing? Or worse yet, or more accurately, did Jimmy do something I didn't approve of? And then the question is, have I done those things? Yeah, lots of them. But when I do it, I'm not a jerk. I just, misunderstood. And so when we start to look at the world more accurately, we start to see that the world that we interact with has a lot to do with how I'm feeling, my labels, how I perceive, and what I project on people. And I also start to, if I'm looking at this more accurately, I start to recognize our interdependence, that everything I get to have in my life is because of others. We're here because of each other. Everything I've learned to, speak about, the language to use, the words I've read, who taught me? Others taught me. Who created language? Who wrote text? Who figured out how to take a tree and turn it into paper? When we think about everything that we think we have that's mine, is because of a countless others that built these buildings that we're sitting in, that created language, that taught us to read and write. How many went before us so that we could have the life that we have today? We can't even imagine it. I know there's some people here in recovery. Imagine, I mentioned this the other night, I thought about this the other day, was two guys having a conversation a whole bunch of years ago that didn't even know each other. That conversation wound up helping millions of people change their lives because they're having a conversation. How many people before us gave us the life we have? And when I start thinking about me and mine, I totally forget about we and ours. And that's how the world actually exists. That whatever's going on out there is having a direct impact on everything we get to experience. And it has gone on since beginningless time. So that's a much more accurate way of the world. And when I remember that, then there's a sense of gratitude that allows me to be truly, truly grateful for the opportunities and the moments of these lives that will never come again, and this opportunity to live in this life. A lot harder for anger to arise in that sense. A lot harder. So, this is kind of laying the groundwork for us to fit into why would we then, what are some of these tools? Because we can start to understand the interdependence of things. We can start to understand that the food that I eat, so many people helped create. The clothes I get to wear, the words I get to use. How many people took care of us just so we could be here today? We can intellectually get that. But we often forget it as soon as we walk out the door. And then there's my stuff and your stuff and that stuff. And then so quickly, so profoundly quickly, even in our clearest of moments with the best of intentions, with the open heart, we can get pissed off because somebody ain't acting right. And I really think that they're the cause of my problem. It's a instant delusion, and it's strong. So in order to counteract that, we need to literally start engaging consciously in some practices that counteract that force that just wants to put me as the center of the universe. And so these practices that we've been on now are about cultivating bodhicitta, the great compassion. The compassion that really seeks and only has one motivation, seeks to eliminate the suffering that's rampant in this world that we live in. That's its only care, its only concern, is how do I eliminate suffering in my life, your life. That's it. It has one purpose. Not asking questions, doesn't care what your background is, doesn't care what it is. It just says, hey, what's the healthiest thing to do right here, right now to eliminate suffering? And in the long term, what's the healthiest way to live? That's going to eliminate suffering. And if the core of suffering is self-grasping attitudes of self-centeredness, what's the best way for me to eliminate that and see and understand that I'm a part of something much bigger? So that's what these practices have been designed to do. And so the opening verse of the 8 verses is really the idea that we want to achieve. And it says, by thinking of all sentient beings as even better than a wish-granting gem, that is something that could offer us anything we want. All others is more precious than that. For accomplishing the highest aim, may I consider them precious. So the aspiration is really to see all others as truly more precious than anything else I could ever imagine. For all others give me the opportunity to cultivate my highest potentials. I wouldn't have any shot of cultivating compassion without others. I wouldn't have any chance of cultivating my highest potentials and recognizing my true nature, my divine nature, if it wasn't for others. And that you're all my teachers, and you provide that opportunity for growth. And so this is that first verse. It says, really, seeing all beings as more precious than even a wish-fulfilling gem. May I hold you dear. And holding you dear, you allow me that opportunity to really work with the source of my suffering, my own self-cherishing attitude, and truly make my life meaningful. That's what this is for. And then the other verses start giving you how to. And so we've worked our way to, we're at 7 and 8, the last 2 of the 8. So we've gone through and there's these practices. And the last 2, Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi said they get progressively more difficult. But there's, they all interdependent, so it does vary. So verse 7 is exchanging of self with others. And it says in this translation, in short, may I offer, both directly and indirectly, all joy and benefit to all beings, my mothers. And may I myself secretly take upon all of their hurt and suffering. So again, in short, may I offer both directly and indirectly all joy and benefit to all beings, my mothers. And really giving, may I offer all that is good, all that is virtuous, all that is wonderful that I could to all others, and see them as my mothers, as I would my mom. And secretly taking upon myself all of their suffering. Now, tall order, right? But cultivating such an attitude really just cuts right through the real source of my angst, depression, loneliness, despair, anger, resentment. Cuts right through that. Because I'm no longer concerned with these very mundane things. I'm really concerned with the potentials that we all have and making my life truly purposeful. So this is a method of called Tonglen practice. Tonglen is taking and giving, the practice of taking and giving. And so it's a secret practice, was secret for a long time. It's now taught more openly, and the practice itself is a meditation, which I'll just talk about. And the idea is that when I meditate, I can visualize first someone that I care for. We place some cards here of people that we care for who need some prayers. Tonglen's a great practice for that. Is that I visualize this person in front of me, and I see their suffering. And as I see them in front of me, really the desire to eliminate their suffering compels me to do my best to remove it. So with the Tonglen, the idea is that at the core of my heart is this little dark seed, my own self-cherishing attitude that just gets me caught up in all of my drama. It's right here at my heart. And so as I visualize this person I care for struggling and in pain, I meditate, bringing them present in front of me. And then, as I become centered and balanced and aware of my breath, the desire to remove their suffering arises. And so I visualize all of their suffering coming out of their body in a thick, dark smoke. All of their suffering, all of their pain, it starts to leave their body. And as it leaves their body, it comes in through my nose and comes right down to my heart on the inhale. And as it touches that black spot right here, it just explodes. I mean, it just tears apart my own self-cherishing attitude. The desire to take on their suffering comes right here. And then this self-cherishing attitude just dissolves in this light of virtue, of love and kindness. Comes out, and now I'm giving all of the virtue, all of the goodness, anything I've ever done in my lifetime's coming out, and I give to them, and it goes into them. So we take their pain and we give our virtue. And with each breath, we see them getting better. We see them getting more vibrant. We see them getting healthier. We see them getting well. It's a beautiful practice. And now this is something they always say, start with someone you really care for, because it's easier, obviously. And then as we get really proficient in this, we start expanding it out to people that are more neutral, people that we just see, people we've heard about. Sometimes, like I do, I'll be thinking about like all those who are struggling in Syria, or over there with the pipeline protests, and seeing that suffering there, and I'll visualize that whole group, and then we can use that as a practice, so you can expand it out to groups of people. But over time, as you get proficient to, you really want to then be able to direct it at those that we struggle with, that we don't like, that we don't care for. Boy, and that puts some meat into this practice, to really take upon their suffering and to give them your virtue. But we don't start there. I used to be all gung-ho, and I remember teaching this once, my first time as a monk. I went there first. A little hard. So Dalai Lama and all my teachers will say, we start with people we care for. So we get a really good, open way of being, and then we expand this practice. And so this is such a profound practice. It's at the core of mind training. That the monk I mentioned to you, who was imprisoned and tortured all those years, this was a primary practice of his. My teacher, Venerable Geshe Gelsen, up here on your right, they called him the Tonglen Lama. And basically, if he was breathing, he was doing Tonglen. And he would tell you, you don't have to sit and be formal thing. You can be in line at the market. You can see people suffering. You can be doing this. It's as easy as breathing. As easy as breathing. And the more that you do it, the more it just shifts. It just shifts that mind of ours. When we think about how many times in our own house with people we love and care for, we get frustrated and angry. Imagine if we were doing Tonglen, how that would counteract. Let alone if I was having to go engage in something that I found difficult. If I did a little Tonglen. We have a teacher in the room. Imagine seeing all of our students, they're suffering. And seeing that, I really want to bring some light into their candle of life. And how we can do that. How can we bring that into our relationships in our home? We can be so hard on the ones we care about the most. So this is such a powerful tool. And then in the text there, he makes a point to say, as we do this, don't worry about that you're going to catch their diseases and stuff, because a lot of people will worry about that. And he says, not to worry about it. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, this is a primary fundamental practice he does. My teacher, Geshe Gelsen, and so many others. So in this verse, it's really giving us that advice, and it's secret too. We don't go bragging about it. It's something we do on our own quietly, and it's as easy as breathing. But it's really nice to do it, especially when someone we really care for is struggling, and we feel so hopeless, like there's not much we can do. We can sit and we can do this. And not only, it shifts. We benefit. It's really merit. That is incredible. But I would also argue and debate that it also has the potential to really impact them as well. And the rationale I have is that there's causes and conditions. And so if someone I know is suffering and they're struggling, and it inspires me to do and take on one of the most potent practices of cultivating bodhicitta, the willingness to put my own self-centered attitude in the crux of suffering and take that on. That person was the condition that gave rise to this action. How can they not be linked? When I see someone suffering and they inspire me to take on such a virtuous practice, how is that karmically not linked that they get some benefit from that? It's a good thing to bear in mind that these others in their struggles are inspiring me to cultivate a highest potential for all beings, that we can then be linked in that action. So very powerful for me personally as I apply that. I did question the abbot of my monastery on that reasoning, and he looks at me after I explained it all. He goes, "Yeah, that makes sense." Yeah. So this is just this really beautiful practice, and again, something that you can do really quietly, and something that you can do daily, and something that the more that you do, the more you will notice a shift away from such a self-cherishing attitude that really creates a lot of mental affliction. One that just really said, how can I help? And what a different attitude in life. In other words, what can you do for me? How can I help? How can I help? Or whatever's happening, the first question comes to mind is, how can we improve this? Imagine that in an argument. Instead of arguing, hey, I'm really sorry about this. How can we improve it? Not you did this and I did this and what about... No, how can we improve this? That's how bodhicitta arises. How can we improve this? How can we reduce the suffering? What can we do? So this practice, a really solid, visceral practice. And the last verse, may they not be defiled by the concepts of the 8 worldly concerns, and aware that all things are illusory. May they, ungrasping, be free from bondage. So here in this last verse, it's really saying, here's how it kind of ties, all the verses together in the sense of, without my mind, without my actions being defiled by the stains of the 8 worldly concerns, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, to practice without grasping, to really work for the benefit of all beings. It says, it just outlines the number one problem. Without my mind getting caught up in the 8 worldly concerns. I mean, this is the mundane life. This is the misperception that really creates all of our pain and struggle. They say, there's a really great quote I read the other day by one of the lamas. It says, a real vacation is a vacation away from the 8 worldly concerns. That's a real vacation. And so these 8 worldly concerns, I know we have some people who are newer here, is 8 worldly concerns are pretty much, if you look at your life, they are what dominate everything that you do. Gain and loss, right? I do things to get what I want. I don't want to lose it. So I get really happy when I get what I want, and I'm really sad when I lose stuff. So I will do a lot to get what I want and to not lose it. I'll lock my stuff up. I'll make sure I get insurance. I'll guard stuff. I don't want to lose my stuff. And I want to get my stuff. So gain and loss. That's natural, right? I want a new jacket, go buy a new jacket, and I got to have money, go buy a new jacket. So we spend a lot of time energy in getting what we want and trying not to lose it. Pain and pleasure, come on now. Who doesn't wake up and think what's going to make me feel good today? Pleasure, right? My meals, what I'm going to go do, the music, whatever. We really want pleasurable experiences, and we want to avoid painful ones. Praise and criticism. That we like it when people praise us, and we don't like it when they criticize us. And then a real sticky subject is this last one. I like to term it as good reputation and really bad reputation. Like, I like it when somebody thinks of me as a good reputation, that I'm somebody. And I don't like it when you think I'm a complete idiot. Like, oh, there's John again. Really? You gotta listen to that guy again? If we think about from the moment we get up, don't these 8 worldly concerns just drive us? How am I going to get dressed? What do I look like? What will other people think of me? How am I going to carry myself? Who's, boom, boom, boom. What's going to make me feel good? How, all that stuff. Ching, ching, ching. And it's auto. It's just boom, boom. 8 worldly concerns. And they call them worldly because they're very temporary, ephemeral. I mean, they don't last, right? How many times have you had all your needs met and everything go exactly the way you wanted to, and you had the perfect whatever, and then it was Tuesday, okay? And it's just gone. It's like that perfect, it's gone, and now I got something else to worry about. It's just this vicious cycle of gain and loss, pain and pleasure, boom, 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 and we're just so caught up, and what do we get stressed and worried over? If you were not caught up in the 8 worldly concerns, would you have stress? If I wasn't so concerned about it being this way or that way, would I really be caught up in all this stress, worry, fear, and concern? A real vacation is a vacation from the 8 worldly concerns. And the fundamental thing is, well, it's normal to want certain things and try to avoid harmful things. That's normal. But when they're your primary fundamental driving nature and it's only concerned in this worldly existence, you're in for a hell of a ride. And it's going to hurt a lot. And it's unnecessary because none of those things will ever provide any lasting happiness, any lasting peace, any resiliency, any well-being. They can't. Their nature is not that. Their very nature just requires more. Something fundamentally, this middle point, we grasp onto in just a very universal human condition, is that what can provide us, I mean, our refuge in Buddhism can provide us something we can rely upon. That middle ground that I want to present here before I go to that step is for all of us who are not Buddhists or don't really have that teaching. It's just fundamentally clear. What will provide you lasting happiness, inner peace, and resiliency is doing things you feel good about. An honorable life, integrity, and value, right? When I do that, whether I get what I want or don't is not going to be so big. When I show up in a way and do the right thing, I'll do it regardless of praise or criticism. I'll do it regardless of good reputation or bad reputation. I will show up in a way that's meaningful. And that's something that will have staying power. Those worldly concerns are ideally secondary nature of motivation. First motivation. What's the most compassionate thing I can do? What's the healthiest thing I can do? And then you factor in pain and pleasure and what I want, what I don't want to lose, and all those other things. But when they are functioning as our highest level, we're just constantly trying to arrange the world out there to make me feel good based on 8 worldly concerns, and it won't last either way. And then it creates all the conditions for all that mental and emotional suffering, because I think it ought to be different than it is. And if only it was, I could be happy. It's a compelling story. It's a compelling narrative that just drags us around all day. And we forget that none of that has any basis in reality. So here in Buddhism, we seek a refuge. And the refuge, what you can really sink your teeth into, that you can lean into, that is there beyond all else, is just truth. It's the nature of truth. The Dharma is the nature of truth. And if you can't lean into the truth, I'm not sure there's much else to lean into. You know, if I can just lean into truth. And in truth, guess what? Things are impermanent. They come and go. Right? There's nothing outside that's ever going to fill my empty hole. That's just the nature of it. There's no one person, thing, event that's ever going to fill this. That's going to cultivate my highest potential. I'm not going to find any lasting happiness in anything outside of me. And the real source of my mental and emotional suffering is within, not without. This sense of non-self. That's called the 3 marks of existence. Impermanence, unsatisfactoriness of this nature of phenomenon that we live in, and non-self, this idea that I grab onto, my ego, that becomes the guiding force in my life. The little John that's dragging this much greater thing around that traps me. So Buddhism is about, well, let's lean into the truth. Let's lean into the nature of things, which is an interdependent nature. I'm not the same John that was here an hour ago, and neither are any of you. And we're all in this together. And guess what? Nobody's getting out alive. And my happiness and sorrow and joy and despair has a lot more to do with my perception and how I relate to the events of my life than the events themselves. So starting there, wow, is there a way that I can open up my heart a little more to everyone? Because I recognize that when you are happy, when you are healthy, when you are well, this world's a better place. And so's my world. And when your needs are met, you're not busting into my car, which is a good thing, right? There's less suffering in the world when people's needs are met. There's more kindness in this world. Because that's our nature. Our nature is kindness. And it's cluttered up with a lot of grasping. But our very core, we all want to be good people. We all want to be loving people. And that's our nature. And we forget that sometimes. And we actually think we're in competition with others rather than a part of each other. So these practices are about that. So they invite us at the end to, now that we've had these teachings, to not let the 8 worldly concerns be our driving force, but to rest our awareness in the nature of reality itself, this interdependent experience that we all have with each other, and to use the events of our life to cultivate our highest potentials, the lessons of our lives, to make our life really purposeful. In the Buddhist context is to become literally enlightened, to know our own nature, to be totally free of all conditioned existence, all limitations of karma, to be liberated. Right now, you have all those conditions. Right now. They're available. And so it inspires us to say, let's remember that. And we have this opportunity now to not get swept away in very temporal, mundane, worldly things that keep us away from this greater truth. To engage in this life in a meaningful way. And then just want to thank all of you. Donations are what create the conditions for our center to thrive and flourish, and it's been growing a little bit. So Dharma is always offered freely. There's never a charge for Dharma. So if people find it beneficial, they make offerings, and then Dharma flourishes. So if you can help, if you want to be a member, you can see Erin at the end, or Laura in the back. And that's that. So we'll do our final dedication here. So we've accumulated a great deal of merit and wisdom, hopefully. And now we can dedicate this for the benefit of all beings. And so we'll just conclude with that dedication of merit. All the things we could have been doing on a Wednesday night. We're here helping all sentient beings. So. Let us dedicate all of the merit and wisdom we have accumulated both here today and throughout our lifetimes, both individually and collectively. We dedicate this for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. And may we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lives to cultivate our own highest potentials, to purify our minds, to recognize our own Buddha nature, and to achieve enlightenment for the welfare of all beings. All right, well, thank you all so much. It's such a joy to share some time with all of you. And as usual, try to stay out of trouble for another week. Yeah, I'm very happy to be able, I'll be here a whole bunch of the next Wednesdays. So I have one little more weekend trip, but I'll be mostly around. So hopefully we'll get some time to spend with you. So be well. And thanks for joining us online.